Hello and welcome to the 29th episode of the Indian Interest Podcast. This is a podcast in which we look at the world from the perspective of the Indian national interest. So thank you so much for being on this live stream with me. And I welcome those of you who are going to watch this later as well. So before we begin, yes, I am aware of what has happened. Israel has attacked Iran. They have carried out a decapitation strike on Iran. They have apparently eliminated some members of Iran's top leadership. And they have warned that if Iran retaliates, then they will carry out further decapitation strikes. So Iran is now left with the option of either not responding at all and looking and essentially being reduced to a punching bag, or taking the risk of attacking Israel. So this is something I've been warning about for the past few weeks, that the Iran nuclear deal angle could soon come to a head and reach a flashpoint. So here we are. We are at that flashpoint. Now, I will not go into this in detail in this episode, but understand this thing. Understand this much. Indians, especially if you're Indian, that the last thing India needs is a regime change in Iran. The regime of the ayatollahs and mullahs is far better for India than a potential pro-US regime in Iran. In case you have not studied history, Iran, when it was under the Shah, was a strongly pro-Pakistan, pro-US nation. And they supported Pakistan in the 1965 war against India. So the last thing India needs is a regime change in Iran, which completely upends the geopolitical balance of power in the Indian subcontinent, extended Indian subcontinent region. That's the last thing India needs. It will be a disaster for India. Then you will not only have Pakistan, you will also have Iran, which is pro-US, right? And then things will be very, very different for India if that happens. So it is good for India to have the current regime in Iran. I know lots of Indians are right now celebrating that Iran got hit by Israel. Those people need to have their heads examined, or they need to, get an education in actual geopolitics. Anyhow, that's about the Iran-Israel situation. It's an ongoing situation. It's a flashpoint. Now let's talk about the Indian interest. Let's talk about what's happened in the past few days that is important for India, that is important from India's perspective, and what are the things that are ongoing that India needs to keep an eye on, because it affects our national interest. And the predictions or forecasts that I had done last week, let's do a fact check on them. Also, that's also something we will do in this episode, to see whether I have been on the right track, or whether I am completely led astray by my imagination. And we will also look at some subtle hints of what might happen going forward. So this is mostly going to be a forward-looking episode. There's a lot to unpack in this. I'm going to do it in the next hour and a half, maybe hopefully less than that. So let us get going with that. And I, as always, have a presentation for you all so that you can see data on your screen and not just see my face and me talking. So let's put some data on the screen. What are the most impactful developments that have happened that concern India in the past week or 10 days. So we're going to discuss the deepening China-Pakistan military alliance. We're going to talk about recent conflicts. We're going to talk about diplomatic setbacks that India has suffered. We're going to talk about defense modernization efforts that are happening in India. And we're going to talk about economic strategies that are reshaping India's role on the very rapidly evolving world stage. So let's get going with the first major development, which is that the China-Pakistan military axis is deepening. China has been the past year and a half making these noises that it wants to normalize relations with India and have a friendly relationship. Well, I think that's all now, it's in the rear view mirror now. It's all in the past, because the China-Pakistan military axis is deepening. China is coming out openly in support of Pakistan. So recently, as we know, about a month ago, we had a 3-day war with Pakistan in which we hammered Pakistan very badly. And this apparently witnessed the operational development of the Chinese J-10C fighter jets by Pakistani pilots. Okay. And apparently a few of these aircraft were shot down, but we have not provided proof of that. So we will not go and further the claim. So following Pakistan's disastrous performance in the conflict, which also saw disastrous performance by Chinese-made weapon systems. China has now offered its advanced HQ-19 air defense system to the Pakistanis to counter India's S-400. And Pakistan has announced plans to purchase 40 Chinese J-35 advanced stealth fighter jets. So this is a direct challenge to India. The use of these advanced, see, thus far they have had these not very advanced Chinese platforms, but the use of advanced Chinese platforms in direct combat against India, well, supposedly advanced, that signals a major escalation of the China-Pakistan alliance. And now that, if Pakistan acquires even more advanced uh, weapon systems, well, that makes China an indirect participant in any future conflict between India and Pakistan. This could indicate a shift in the military balance. China is actively working to negate India's military advantages and reduce its own strategic vulnerability by ensuring that Pakistan remains a potent counterweight to India that constantly keeps India off balance. So this is the two-front scenario that India has always been preparing for. This alliance forces India into a more complex two-front military planning scenario, which fundamentally alters the security dynamics in the region. So this is the first big ongoing development that we have. What do we have next? Well, something we discussed yesterday in the fifth episode of Geostrategy, the crash of the Air India Boeing 787 in Ahmedabad that happened yesterday. So an Air India Boeing 787 Dreamliner crashed in Ahmedabad yesterday, killing 241 people, leaving only one survivor. This is the first ever major crash for a Boeing 787, and this has prompted already an international investigation with the US NTSB getting involved, and this has caused an immediate 5% drop in Boeing's stock. So 241 lives were lost, lives of passengers. There have also been lives that were lost on the ground because the aircraft crashed into a medical college hostel or some kind of such establishment, and because of that there were lives that were lost on the ground as well. There's been a 5% stock drop for Boeing, immediate financial impact on the manufacturer. This is the first ever major crash for this aircraft model. And this is a national tragedy which places India's rapidly growing aviation sector under intense scrutiny, international scrutiny, particularly concerning safety protocols and oversight. Maybe this is a good time. I mean, this is a horrible tragedy, no question about it. Nobody can deny that. But maybe this will have the effect of prompting more stringent scrutiny on India's safety protocols and oversight. Maybe India has been very lucky thus far, considering the kind of safety protocols we have been following thus far. So this is a high-profile disaster that also tests India's crisis management and international cooperation capabilities. So this is still an ongoing process. We still don't know what has caused the accident. Looks like there was simultaneous dual engine failure, which is like unheard of. But let's see now what the investigation reveals. So this is an ongoing matter for us. Then US-India relations are being tested by the Americans. So the US is performing what they call a complex balancing act in India's traditional subcontinental sphere of influence, with CENTCOM praising Pakistan as a phenomenal partner in inviting Pakistan's terrorist army chief for a visit to the US. So that's happening on the one hand. On the other hand, the State Department is paying lip service by apparently reaffirming support for India's counterterrorism efforts. So you could label this as a diplomatic setback for India, a setback that has been imposed on India by the Americans, by the Trump administration. So there's US-Pakistan engagement. CENTCOM, so the Central Command, has praised Pakistan as a phenomenal partner. It's invited Asim Munir to visit Washington, D.C. The State Department has paid lip service by reaffirming support for India's counter-terrorism efforts. So on the one hand, they provide material support to the Pakistanis, the terrorist nation, Terroristan. On the other hand, they said, we reaffirm support for India's counter-terrorism efforts. The US is now establishing itself as a state supporter of Terroristan, right? So this is dual messaging. They're saying one thing and they're doing another thing. Words versus actions. The words are in support of India, the actions are in support of Pakistan. Actions always trump words. So this is creating strategic uncertainty, this dual messaging, right? It's creating uncertainty for us, for New Delhi, and it's undermining our rightful efforts to diplomatically isolate Pakistan. But when the US, the most powerful nation, is very happy to invite Pakistani's terrorist army chief to Washington, well, where's the isolation then, right? So the US is determined to undermine India's efforts. And because of this, India must accelerate its partnerships with other nations. The US is not a reliable partner. Let's be very clear about this. So India needs to accelerate its partnerships with other nations like France, with Russia, etc., and many others, to counterbalance these actions by the United States, these unfriendly actions by the United States. India is accelerating its indigenous defense capabilities. So we had this conflict a month ago with Pakistan, a 3-day aerial war in May last month. So after the pause in this conflict, India has, so this has served as a wake-up call for Bharat, right? Unless there's a crisis, we don't act in this country. So this 3-day war has acted as a wake-up call for us. And as a consequence, India has accelerated its defense modernization and indigenization efforts. So what are the key initiatives? Some of these key initiatives include acquiring indigenous I-Star planes and QR, quick reaction surface-to-air missile, QRSAM air defense systems, and developing AI-powered weapons like the Shatrunash and Agni Astra systems. So the I-Star planes, these are surveillance planes. So there's this proposed acquisition of indigenous I-Star spy planes in a 10,000 crore rupee project to improve intelligence gathering capabilities. There's the approval of 30,000 crore rupee deal for domestically produced QR SAM systems to counter aerial threats. Well, I'm glad this 3-day war happened, because now we see we got a taste of the aerial threats that we face from Pakistan. But there's a much bigger threat that exists to our north, the undemarcated India-Tibet border. Tibet is occupied by China. There's a much bigger threat over there, right? So that's going to be a different dimension of threat. So we need to have these QR SAM systems, very quick reaction surface-to-air missile systems, which can be used to take out incoming bogies, essentially. So that's that. There's AI-powered systems, development of AI-powered light machine gun and other systems like Shatrunash and Agni Astra for next-generation warfare. And DRDO has transferred technology for 9 defense systems to Indian manufacturers, which is obviously, I'm glad to hear this, it's going to boost domestic production. Now, there's this. China continues its very friendly actions towards India. I'm being sarcastic here. China's rare earth export controls. So China has implemented export controls on critical rare earth minerals and magnets, which is disrupting global supply chains. But these restrictions are especially aimed at India, and they are directly impacting India's automotive sector and highlighting India's strategic vulnerability, despite India possessing its own undeveloped rare earth reserves. So India, as always, has been caught napping. We have our own rare earth reserves, but these are undeveloped. And to develop these reserves, to develop the capability to exploit these reserves, we're gonna have to invest a lot. It's gonna take time. It's gonna take years to do that. So that's the situation that we are in right now. So the Chinese restrictions are going to cause an immediate impact on India's manufacturing. India is planning comprehensive critical mineral strategy within 90 days. That's wonderful. You have woken up after you faced a direct threat, right? So this should have been done long ago. But anyway, here we are today. Here we are. So we're going to have to do some kind of planning. And we're going to have to create a comprehensive critical mineral strategy the next 3 months. And we're going to have a committee that will be set up for this, and they will give some proposals and recommendations. And that's how India works. So that's where we are. India is doing strategic lithium diplomacy in South America to challenge China's dominance. So in various South American countries are big They have big lithium reserves. Well, we had heard that India has also discovered huge lithium reserves in Jammu and Kashmir and other places. What about those? What was that true, or was it just a mirage? I'm hoping that this was genuine news, in which case we should develop these our own reserves. But anyway, these are the actions that one hears about. That's what I've been hearing about the past week or so. So India finds itself caught in the crossfire of the US China technology war. China's actions demonstrate its ability to use resource leverage to influence India's economic trajectory, and in this will potentially delay India's industrial development and green energy transition goals. So this is another major development the past week, and this is going to intensify this thing. Now, the Iranian president, Mr. Masood Pezeshkian, has offered to mediate in the so-called India-Pakistan conflict. So this offer happened when Mr. Masood Pezeshkian spoke to Mr. Shahbaz Sharif, the so-called Prime Minister of Pakistan, on the phone. And this is unprecedented. This represents an unprecedented diplomatic intervention from Tehran into Indian subcontinental security affairs. Now, look, Iran is a friendly nation for us, but we need to tell Iran, look, gentlemen, you have big problems of your own right now. Why don't you focus, gentlemen, respectfully? Why don't you focus on resolving your own issues? You have a big problem ongoing with the Americans, with the Israelis. Let India deal with this temporary nation, right? So that's what we need to tell Iran. So this is a novel diplomatic development. Iran's initiative aims to enhance Iran's regional influence and project Iran as a stabilizing power, challenging the traditional rules of the US, China, Russia, and so on in diplomacy in the region. The Americans are known to interfere in the region. The Chinese have been poking their noses and fingers all over the place, no question. Russia has been a welcome partner for India historically, right? So Iran wants to insert itself into this region and the diplomacy in this region. I think India should politely tell Iran, please, gentlemen, please, you have problems of your own. You need some help there. We can help you. We don't need your help over here. So this move happens. It comes as Iran is deepening its own strategic ties with Russia and China, and this potentially indicates a coordinated effort among these powers to reshape the regional security architectures, or maybe not. Anyhow, this is clearly unwelcome for India. Okay, this contradicts India's long-held policy of bilateral only dealings with Pakistan. And there's absolutely no scope from our perspective, for any kind of third-party mediation on Jammu and Kashmir. So once again, this move could complicate India's strategy of isolating Pakistan, and maybe it signals a new complex variable in regional geopolitics. India will most likely diplomatically acknowledge, but effectively sideline this offer. And I think now, in the past 24 hours, the Iranians will have discovered they have more pressing issues back home. Okay, so now let's take a look at, for the sake of transparency, let's take a look at the predictions I made last week. Right? We now turn to an assessment of my previous predictions regarding regional developments. So this analysis that I'm going to show you now will examine how accurately I forecasted. This is more forecasting than predictions, okay? Because this comes with multiple scenarios with probability distributions, with probabilities assigned to each to each scenario. It's more of forecasting, less of predictions, but forecasting is actually very important. So I forecasted various evolving situations in the subcontinent region and beyond. I focused on the India-Pakistan issue, the water dispute, the India-China strategic competition, and India's defense modernization efforts. Let's see how accurately or not I forecasted this. So each prediction will be evaluated against actual developments that have happened in the 8-9 days since I made these forecasts, and I'll show you a brief detailed breakdown of what materialized and what did not materialize. And this, I'm doing it publicly and very transparently, which will help me refine my own analytical framework for future assessments. So let's get into it. What was the first forecast? Prediction number one: India Pakistan water issue and border slash LOC tensions. I had given three scenarios. Scenario A was a sustained crisis. I gave it 85% probability of happening within the next 30 to 60 days. That was like 9 days ago. Scenario B was limited de escalation. I said this is a low probability, 10% in the next 2 to 3 months. And scenario C was a military conflict with a very low probability, 5% in the next month to 3 months. So the primary prediction I made was that India would maintain its suspension of the Indus Water Treaty and reduced water flow from the Chenab, citing Pakistan's proven support for cross-border terrorism. And I expected Pakistan to intensify its diplomatic efforts to internationalize the issue, seeking intervention from the World Bank and its allies like the Chinese, the Americans. And I said that border clashes would continue possibly, but they will fall short of full-scale conflict. So what has actually happened? The outcome is that scenario A is largely confirmed. The core elements of my most likely scenario, 85% probability, scenario A, the core elements of this have materialized almost exactly as predicted with 90% verification accuracy. So India has maintained its suspension of the Indus Waters Treaty imposed on the 23rd of April following the terrorist attack in Pahalgam, and there are no signs of India even considering any kind of or even dreaming of any kind of reversal of this policy. So India continues to regulate water flow from the Chenab River. India is maintaining the suspension with no signs of reversal. And this confirms my prediction that India would cite Pakistan's continuing support for cross-border terrorism as a valid and just reason for continuing the suspension. So now Pakistan is experiencing a critical water shortage, with the Punjab province having 1.28 lakhs cusecs available, which is a significant decrease of 14,800 cusecs from last year. And IRSA has reported a 21% nationwide shortage of water, with live storage in major dams reduced by nearly 50% in Pakistan. Pakistan has intensified its diplomatic efforts to internationalize this so-called dispute, with the Water Resources Secretary of Pakistan writing multiple unanswered letters to India, and Senator Sherry Rahman calling for renewed meetings of the Indus Waters Commission, which are falling on deaf ears naturally. Let's take a brief look at scenarios B and C and assess what's happened thus far vis-a-vis these scenarios. So scenario B was limited de-escalation. I said that this would not happen, very low likelihood, and the prediction accuracy is 0%. So I was right. There's no evidence of any de-escalation or any partial restoration of water flow during this period, from June 3 to 13th. India has maintained its firm stance. India has refused to engage in any discussions with Pakistan until Pakistan addresses the core issue of cross-border terrorism. No technical talks have been initiated, and the full suspension of the Indus Waters Treaty remains in place without any operational easing. Scenario C was a military miscalculation, 30% accuracy. Well, a full-scale conventional conflict has not materialized, but several concerning elements are evident. First of all, Pakistan's water crisis is reaching critical levels, which is going to create domestic pressure on the so-called government as well as the military dictatorship. Pakistan has made increasingly desperate statements, with officials threatening that water disruption would be considered an act of war. Okay, let's see about that. And China has entered the dispute more directly, with Chinese officials making veiled threats about potentially restricting Brahmaputra waters. Well, I have made a whole detailed analysis about that in one of my previous episodes, and that tells you that if you watch it, it will tell you that the Chinese threats are hollow. Anyhow, so that's scenarios B and C. What's the timeline for prediction one? The timeline assessment. So the predictions had this 30 to 60 day timeline for scenario A, and this has proven accurate thus far, as the sustained diplomatic crisis and water restrictions have continued unabated 10 days into the predicted timeline. The absence of any de-escalation measures suggests that scenario B's 60 to 90 day timeline may not materialize at all, and that scenario has a 0% prediction accuracy right now. So it all started on the 23rd of April when India suspended the Indus Waters Treaty. after the terrorist attack in Pahalgam. In May 25, Pakistan experienced severe water shortages. Agricultural production was impacted. On June 2, 2025, the Punjab province of Pakistan reported 14,800 cusecs decrease compared to the similar time in 2024 last year. And June 9, 25, an economic survey confirms that agricultural sector collapse has happened, with major crops declining by about 13.5%. So scenario A has been largely confirmed with remarkable accuracy. We can see there's a sustained diplomatic crisis. We can see there is continued water restrictions. We can see there's already a severe agricultural impact on Pakistan, and we are already witnessing intensified Pakistani efforts to internationalize the dispute. So yes, scenario A is proving out to be correct. Now next, prediction 2: India-China strategic competition, in which I gave three scenarios. Scenario A was diplomatic pressure. I said there would be a 70% probability of this scenario in the next 45 to 90 days. Scenario B was economic retaliation with a 25% probability, 2 to 3 months. And scenario C was a military escalation between India and China, 5% probability in the next month to 3 months. So the main scenario was that I predicted that China would retaliate against India's Indus Waters Treaty actions by increasing diplomatic support for Pakistan and implementing targeted export controls on critical minerals affecting Indian industries. I predicted India to respond by accelerating friend-shoring initiatives and strengthening security ties with the Quad and ASEAN nations. And I said that border tensions would remain managed through through existing mechanisms. This was scenario A in my forecast. So what's the outcome thus far in the last 10 days or so? The outcome is that scenario A is partially fulfilled thus far, 10 days into the prediction. So based on comprehensive research of developments between June 3 and June 13, which is today, several elements from the predicted scenarios have actually materialized, with scenario A showing the strongest evidence of partial fulfillment. First of all, export controls by China. China has implemented targeted export controls on rare earth magnets and critical materials to India. These restrictions cover crucial minerals, including samarium, gadolinium, terbium, dysprosium, and lutetium, which are vital for India's electric vehicle manufacturing sector, electronic sector, and defense sector. Critical sectors for India. And these are hitting at the heart of these sectors. These restrictions have created substantial supply chain disruptions for India's automotive industry, with rare earth magnet inventories projected to last only until mid-July this year. A month to go, gentlemen and ladies. So approximately 85% of India's 200 million worth of rare earth magnet imports comes from China. We have allowed this Achilles heel to develop. Did we not know that this day will come one day? So this, I would say, is a strategic failure from India. And now we are responding. Okay, anyhow, we are responding. What's our response been like thus far? India has responded exactly as I predicted, by accelerating what we call friend-shoring initiatives. The Commerce Minister, Mr. Piyush Goyal, confirmed that India is actively working to develop domestic capabilities and to secure alternative supply chains, including partnerships with Australia for critical minerals. Now, this gives tremendous leverage to Australia and its master, the United States. So that's where we are. Let's see some more. What are additional developments in India-China relations? Well, there's the manufacturing shift by Apple. Apple has announced plans to manufacture a majority of US market iPhones in India, with production expected to double to over 60 million units annually by 2026. This shift represents a significant acceleration of India's manufacturing ambitions and reduces dependence on Chinese supply chains. This development aligns perfectly with my prediction about friend-shoring initiatives and demonstrates how global companies are responding to the changing geopolitical landscape. Now, there's diplomatic engagement which goes counter to my prediction of increased diplomatic pressure. Okay? Being very transparent. So contrary to my prediction of increased diplomatic pressure, recent developments show continued diplomatic engagement. On June 12 and 13 is today, Chinese Vice Foreign Minister Sun Weidong visited India. where both countries agreed to expedite the resumption of direct air services and to continue efforts to stabilize and rebuild ties. So the prediction of border stability through existing mechanisms appears to be accurate thus far. Okay, recent reports indicate that India and China are jointly implementing resolutions to end the standoff in eastern Ladakh. Right. Scenarios B and C, let's do a rapid assessment. Scenario B, there's limited evidence for it. So China has indeed implemented export controls on critical minerals, but there's limited evidence of broader significant economic restrictions on Indian goods or investments in specific sectors, as described in scenario B. So the restrictions appear focused primarily on rare earth materials rather than comprehensive sector-wide, sector-based sanctions. And there have been no military incidents. So there's no evidence of any minor localized military standoffs or increased air or naval activity along the LAC or in the Bay of Bengal region, etc., during the June 3 to 13 assessment period. So instead, reports indicate continued cooperation in border management and implementation of existing arrangements and agreements. That's scenario B. Scenario C, there's no evidence of any significant military escalation, broader regional destabilization, or Chinese military intervention in support of Pakistan during the past 10 days or so. So these developments, they suggest that China is pursuing a calculated strategy of economic pressure through supply chain disruption while maintaining diplomatic channels, which reflects the nuanced approach predicted in scenario A rather than the more confrontational approaches outlined in scenarios B and C. So China is taking the initiative, India is responding. That's where we are today. Okay, so that's about the second prediction that I made last week. It's come out to be more or less true. Prediction 3. India's defense production. I gave 3 scenarios once again. Scenario A was major policy announcements, 80% probability within the next 30 to 60 days. Scenario B was selective fast tracking of specific projects with a 15% probability in 60 to 90 days. And scenario C was that the indigenous defense Atmanirbharta drive stalls, and this had a 5% low probability in 90 days. So the main prediction, scenario A, was that following recent conflicts, and high-level calls for self-reliance, the Indian government would announce a comprehensive defense production acceleration program, including significant new funding and accelerated timelines for projects like the AMC, the Advanced Medium Combat Aircraft, various variants of the BrahMos supersonic or hypersonic missile. Advanced variants would be hypersonic, and advanced drone systems with an emphasis on new public-private partnerships. So let's see what happened. How did this forecast fare thus far? So the outcome is that scenario A has largely materialized. Based on comprehensive research of what happened, all the developments that I could analyze in the past 10 days, the predictions regarding India's defense production acceleration show significant alignment with actual events that have happened, which is particularly scenario A. So the Defense Minister of India has approved the Advanced Medium Combat Aircraft Program execution model, which marks a significant policy shift. AMCA program approval. Then there's a landmark policy shift mandating all major defense projects be awarded through competitive bidding rather than nomination-based contracts. Very good. That's how it should be. Good progress. It's a good policy shift, I would say. Then there is defense production has reached an all-time high of rupees 1.46 trillion in the financial year 25 thus far, which marks a 15% increase from the previous year. Excellent going, good going, great going, excellent going. So there's growth in production. And then then emergency procurement powers have been granted to armed forces with capabilities to fast track drone and counter drone systems. Once again, exactly in line with the scenario A that I had put forth. What else do we have? Scenario B. There are some elements of scenario B which are also kind of coming true. So let's see. Strategic imports continue. So the predictions regarding continued reliance on strategic imports, particularly advanced fighter jets, have been validated through several developments, and we'll examine those, showing that scenario B has partially materialized thus far in the past 10 days, alongside the dominant scenario, which is scenario A. So the Russians have made this offer of the Sukhoi 57 export variant of the fighter jet. It's an unprecedented offer for the stealth fighter jet with full source code access. The Ministry of Defense of India is reportedly set to examine this proposal, with evaluations expected over the next 4 to 6 weeks, which is very rapid for India. In India, things take decades. So this is going to happen over the next 4 to 6 weeks, apparently, which is shockingly fast. So this represents a significant strategic import consideration as India seeks to counter China's offer of 40 J-35A stealth fighters to Pakistan. Well, I would like to thank China for this offer they have made to Pakistan. And in case they transfer these jets or sell the jets to Pakistan, I would like to thank them for that. Because unless something like this happens, India doesn't wake up. So I think it's a time for India to really wake up and take action. So that's where we are. Now, the Americans, our dear friends with whom we have apparently shared values, the Americans, they have made a formal offer of the F-35A stealth jet. So they are set to make this formal offer of this F-35A, a Lightning II stealth fighter to India, probably this month. Yeah, structured as a government-to-government foreign military sales agreement with early deliveries, if we agree, potentially starting in late 2027. And so that's another development. India has also granted emergency procurement powers to its armed forces with an overall limit of about 40,000 crore rupees, designated as EP6, allowing the forces to fast track multiple contracts worth 300 crore rupees each. Scenario C has not materialized. Contrary to the prediction of stalled indigenous development, which had a 5% probability in scenario C, the evidence shows accelerated progress across multiple defense domains. Project Kusha development. India's DRDO has announced significant progress on Project Kusha, the indigenous air defense system equivalent to Russia's S-500, not 400 but 500, the advanced one. Okay, with development of critical components underway and prototype completion expected within 12 to 18 months. Fantastic progress. Excellent. Very happy to see this. Then there's the acceleration in the BrahMos program. So following the Operation Sindoor in May 25, India has fast-tracked the development of the 800-kilometer BrahMos missile variant with the newly inaugurated BrahMos Aerospace Integration and Testing Facility in Lucknow, which will play now a pivotal role in this development. Now there's financial commitments as well. So scenario C is all about funding cuts, but rather than funding cuts, India's defense budget may receive an additional boost of 50,000 crore rupees, which is 5.85 billion, potentially crossing 7 lakh crores for the first time ever. The DRDO allocation has increased to 26,816 crore in 2025, which is a 12.41% percentage increase over the previous year. So the successful execution of Operation Sindoor significantly validated India's indigenous defense capabilities. We got to see these systems being battle tested and battle proven for the first time ever. And this has accelerated India's policy decisions, providing strong justification for increased funding allocations. So overall, my forecast of scenario A has come out to be more or less true. Scenario B, some aspects are coming true, and we'll see about that going in the long run. What was the fourth prediction? India's trade diversification. Once again, 3 scenarios. Scenario A was significant progress, 75% probability in 60 to 90 days. Scenario B was mixed progress, 20% probability in 90 days. Scenario C was trade tensions with a 5% probability over 60 to 90 days. So the major scenario, the dominant scenario was scenario A, in which I predicted that India would make notable progress on FTA negotiations with the EU and a limited trade framework with the US. Attracted by PLI schemes and a diversifying global manufacturing landscape, I expected that major tech companies, following Apple's lead, would announce expanded manufacturing investments in India, particularly in electronics and semiconductors. So let's see what has happened. The outcome thus far, it's early days. It's not 60 to 90 days yet. It's early days. But the outcome is that scenario A has partially materialized. The India-EU FTA negotiations have demonstrated remarkable momentum during this time period, the past 10 days, showing strong evidence for scenario A's materialization. So what developments have happened? Our External Affairs Minister, Dr. S. Jaishankar, has expressed confidence that the India-EU free trade agreement is feasible by the end of this year, saying that negotiations are making very good progress. The Commerce Minister, Mr. Piyush Goyal, who's driving the process, he has described the EU deal as very near to conclusion, with only a few issues remaining to be sorted out. That's tremendous progress. Then there's a significant technical progress that has been achieved, with 5 chapters already finalized, including intellectual property, customs and trade facilitation, and so on. The 12th round of negotiations is scheduled for Brussels in July, that's next month, with intensive intersessional engagement planned both virtually and in person. So the next round of negotiations will happen next month, but there's going to be significant intersessional engagement in the interim. Then there's the US trade framework development. So India-US trade negotiations have advanced substantially. There are roadblocks and hiccups in there. Okay, the US is essentially giving maximalist demands to India. But overall, it looks like one could say that the negotiations have advanced substantially, with what they call productive talks held between June 4 to 10th in New Delhi. Both nations are working towards an interim trade deal, not a final trade deal, but an interim trade deal, with discussions covering market access, tariff cuts, digital trade, and supply chain integration. The Americans are playing hardball, and India is not backing off. So yeah, this is going to be more difficult compared to the EU trade agreement. Now let's discuss PLI scheme expansion and technological investments. The government of India has significantly scaled up PLI budget allocations for 2025-26, with electronics and IT hardware seeing allocations surge from 5777 crore to 9,000 crore. It's a big surge. Yes, this represents a clear commitment to attracting manufacturing investments in high-tech sectors. Let's talk about Apple again. Apple's manufacturing expansion in India continues to align with the scenario predictions. The company is undertaking its new production introduction process for the 2025 iPhone 17, 17 model, at an Indian facility, marking a departure from China exclusive practices. So significant change in practices. Apple suppliers manufactured iPhones worth $14 billion in India during financial year 24, comprising about 14% of global production, which demonstrates significant progress in manufacturing diversification. Then there's semiconductor manufacturing. On May 15th, 2025, India approved its 6th semiconductor manufacturing facility, a joint venture between HCL and Foxconn worth $433 million. This facility will produce display driver chips for mobile phones, laptops, and automotive systems, with operations expected by 2027. So this development represents tangible progress, visible, tangible progress that you can feel in semiconductor friend-shoring investments, and it aligns perfectly with my predictions about India's integration into new global supply value chains. Scenario B elements are also evident to a certain extent. So significant progress has happened on both sides, on both the EU front and the US front, but several roadblocks, like I said, persist that kind of align with scenario B predictions about mixed progress on FTAs and moderate investment inflow. What are the challenges? So like I said in the previous slide, the India-US negotiations, they face some sticky issues, including agricultural market access and data localization concerns. India says any data relevant and pertinent to Indian citizens should be localized in India. The US is playing hardball on that. When it comes to agricultural market practice access, the US agricultural products, they are full of hormones and pesticides and whatnot. Their cows are fed meat products, and they are pumped full of hormones. We don't want that dairy to come into India. That is garbage. We don't want the American obesity epidemic to reach India through those agricultural products. We don't want any of that, right? But they want us to open their market for all this nonsense, all that garbage. So that's the sticky point. That's one example of sticky points. I'm sure there are more, right? So India has resisted US demands to open markets to their GMO wheat products, to their GMO dairy products and corn imports, etc., while offering in India is offering limited concessions on high value products like almonds and pistachios. We don't want their agricultural products. Essentially, we don't want our population to fall sick and to become obese like the Americans and whatever other health issues they have. We don't want that. So these are the sticking points that we are facing with the Americans in the negotiations. Then there's the China plus one strategy instead of so evidence is evidence shows, it suggests that companies are indeed adopting a more cautious China plus one approach rather than complete China exit strategies. So India is projected to account for about 20% of global smartphone production by 2025, which represents steady but measured diversification. So companies aren't entirely sold on India. They're still cautious about India. They get everything they want in China, but there are issues over there now. So they want to diversify, but they are still cautious. They don't want to move completely out of China. They want to wait and watch how India goes about things. So India needs to do more, I would say, to convince companies that it's time to move entirely out of China and move into India. So there's a measured manufacturing shift. Global laptop manufacturers like Asus, HP, MSI, etc., are shifting parts of their production lines from China to India, but maintaining a presence in both markets, which reflects a strategic hedging strategy. So this overall trajectory, it suggests that India's trade diversification and integration into global value chains is proceeding largely as predicted in the most optimistic scenario, but there is an element of the measured caution anticipated in the moderate scenario, which is scenario B. And so that should be something that should tell the government of India the reforms, etc., that it needs to do in order to have a more wholesale adoption of India instead of China by foreign companies. So that's about it. Yep. Prediction 5 was about India's regional security posture. Scenario A was strengthened ties with 75% probability in 30 to 60 days. Scenario B was about cautious balancing with a 20% probability over 60 to 90 days. And scenario C was a pessimistic scenario, inward turn, with a small 5% probability over 30 to 90 days. The dominant scenario was scenario A, in which I predicted that India would deepen military cooperation within the Quad, such as joint exercises, tech sharing, and so on, and with other Western partners like EU naval exercises, US defense agreements, and so on. I also expected India to intensify its diplomatic efforts to isolate Pakistan on terrorism and pursue a policy of strategic disengagement with Pakistan while maintaining military readiness. Let's see how this went. So the outcome thus far in the past 10 days or so is that scenario A has partially materialized. Based on news reports published between June 3 to 13, etc., elements of scenario A have thus far partially materialized, with India demonstrating a more assertive regional security posture through strengthened Quad and Western security ties and proactive counter-terrorism diplomacy. So India and the EU conducted a 3-day joint naval exercise in the Indian Ocean from June 1 to 3. 2025, involving Indian Navy warships alongside Italian and Spanish frigates from the European Union Naval Forces Operation Atalanta. The Quad has expanded its Indo-Pacific Partnership for Maritime Domain Awareness to the Indian Ocean region, with India hosting the inaugural symposium of the new Regional Maritime Initiative for Training in the Indo-Pacific, May 3 in 2025. The US is expanding its security partnership with India through robust military exercises like Tiger Triumph and amplifying cooperation within the Quad. A new 10-year defense framework is being finalized. Counter-terrorism diplomacy. So the Pakistan has this policy of state support for terrorism. Pakistan is a state sponsor of terrorism, and the United States is a state sponsor of Pakistan. So that's what we are dealing with today. So India has intensified its diplomatic efforts to isolate Pakistan on terrorism, which aligns with the scenario A predictions. FATF action. India is actively building a case to put Pakistan back on the Financial Action Task Force's grey list at the upcoming meeting this month. And India has prepared a detailed dossier on Pakistan's support for terror networks. Well, okay, good. India has sent parliamentary delegations to 33 countries on a diplomatic mission to drum up support for countering Pakistan-based militant groups. Good. India has specifically engaged with Algeria in North Africa to explore partnerships against Pakistan-based Salafi terrorists. And following the Pahalgam attack, India has pursued a policy of strategic disengagement with Pakistan while maintaining complete military readiness. Now, Elements of scenario B are also present. So they appear to be complementary rather than replacing the more assertive approach described in scenario A. So we have the assertive approach of scenario A, but we also have a complementary set of approaches. Let's look at that. India has launched initiatives to consolidate its influence in the Indian Ocean region, including the Mahasagar policy, which builds on the earlier Sagar initiative. This expanded strategic vision aims to enhance security, trade, and development cooperation across the global south, demonstrating India's regional leadership ambitions. The big region we're talking about. Yep. So there is that. India has demonstrated its commitment to maritime security in the region through initiatives like the Indian Ocean Sagar, IOS Sagar, which brings together naval trainees from 9 friendly foreign nations in the Indian Ocean region for joint training on an Indian naval platform. Excellent initiative. India has also engaged with neighboring countries like Bangladesh, with Prime Minister Modi meeting the Bangladesh Chief Advisor Mohammed Yunus on the sidelines of the BIMSTEC summit in Bangkok, which happened some time ago. So all of this evidence suggests that India is pursuing a multifaceted approach that combines elements of all three scenarios, the strongest emphasis being scenario A, its assertive security posture and proactive diplomacy. So overall, the scenarios are all in line with the predictions. Excellent. Now, let's talk about the top 5 storylines. I could do 7, I could do 20, but we'll focus on 5 so that this doesn't go on forever. We're going to talk about the top 5 storylines to track next week. So let's go for it. The first one is India-Pakistan post-conflict tensions. So we know that we had this brief, intense aerial war in May, the 3-day war, which Pakistan comprehensively lost, and India and Pakistan are now navigating a tense pause or ceasefire, whatever you want to call it. India has escalated pressure by suspending the Indus Waters Treaty, as we know very well, while warning of its readiness to strike further into Pakistan if required. So there's the water crisis escalation. The Pakistani foreign minister has requested a revival of this waters treaty, highlighting an escalating water security crisis in Pakistan. India maintains the treaty suspension as leverage, linking concessions to verifiable action against terrorist infrastructure. The ceasefire or pause of Operation Sindoor, it still holds, and both sides are on high alert. So the May conflict has fundamentally shifted India's strategic posture, demonstrating a new willingness that's never been seen before for preemptive cross-border deep operations. And India is framing these as very justifiably as counter-terror operations against terroristan. And so that's the deal. So this continues, and we're going to have to keep an eye on this in the coming week, because this is an ongoing situation, no question. Next, we talk about China and China's deepening military support for Pakistan. This is something we have to really keep an eye on. So this recent conflict with Pakistan has revealed and accelerated a deepening of China-Pakistan military cooperation, with Pakistan deploying the J-10 fighter planes against India and now seeking more advanced systems like the J-35 to counter its perceived capability gap. So Pakistan is planning to purchase 40 Chinese J-35 stealth fighter jets, and it's acquiring Chinese KJ-500 EWNCS, advanced warning, etc. Aircraft to replace the systems it lost in the conflict, because we shot down multiple systems. China has also offered its advanced HQ-19 air defense missile system to directly counter India's S-400. So there's a triangular security challenge. The operational use of Chinese aircraft by Pakistan against India effectively makes China an indirect participant in the conflict, which transforms the security dynamic from a bilateral to a trilateral challenge for India, a two-front scenario. China is clearly willing to transfer its most advanced systems to Pakistan to restore the strategic balance and to cement Pakistan's role as a counterweight to India, which is going to directly fuel a regional arms race. In India, we discussed it. India is investing, it's going all in on its Atmanirbhar, indigenously developed weapons systems. So India will likely respond by accelerating its own military modernization efforts, which is ongoing, it's visible, right? And India will strengthen defense partnerships with the US, Japan, Australia, etc. within the Quad framework. Now let's discuss the US support for Terroristan. US state support for Terroristan creates a diplomatic setback for Bharat. The US is performing a so-called complex diplomatic balancing act. In other words, it's supporting Pakistan materially while supporting India verbally. Okay? So it's doing this so-called balancing act in the Indian subcontinent, simultaneously claiming to reaffirm support for India's counter-terrorism efforts while inviting Pakistan's army chief for a visit and praising Pakistan as a phenomenal partner. And these are moves that the Indian political establishment will obviously view as a diplomatic setback. Um, Trump has claimed that he mediated. His claim credit for preventing an India-Pakistan nuclear war. If you watched yesterday's presentation of mine about the Trump financial empire and its deep roots in Pakistan, you will know why he intervened in favor of Pakistan, right? Um, so India has rejected this position, and the US CENTCOM General Kurilla has praised Pakistan, which obviously will create friction with India. So this US dual track approach, hypocritical approach, is creating significant strategic anxiety in New Delhi. Well, you surprised, guys? So India perceives this re-engagement with Pakistan's military as undermining its efforts to isolate Islamabad, and this challenges India's position as the primary US regional partner. Well, wake up and smell the coffee, India. Here's where we are. If you thought you could rely on the US, well, I'm glad you woke up today. I'm glad. I hope you've woken up. India's strategic response. Trump's mediation offer on Kashmir is a direct challenge to India's long-standing diplomatic red line. Trump doesn't care about it. Trump has a lot of money to make in Pakistan. He's always going to be on the side of Pakistan. Okay? So this is forcing India to accelerate its pursuit of strategic autonomy and diversify its partnerships with other powers like France and the EU to hedge against US policy shifts. The policy has shifted. You just didn't know it was shifting. So India will likely respond with the diplomatic pressure on the US while accelerating strategic partnerships with other powers, particularly in defense and technology sectors, to demonstrate its strategic autonomy, which means that the F-35 offer is dead before it appears. But they're going to anyway try and push it on India. So another ongoing story, which is going to intensify, is India's accelerated military indigenization. So in response to this heightened threat environment, regional threat environment from Pakistan, China, etc., even Bangladesh, even the Myanmar issue, which impacts Manipur and Mizoram and so on. So we have this terrible heightened regional threat environment. So in response to this, India is accelerating its indigenous defense development and procurement. India has approved major projects for advanced fighter jets, for surveillance aircraft, for missile systems, and AI integrated weapons. The AMCA fighter program, we discussed it. India has given the green light for this fifth generation fighter program. It's going to be a cornerstone of India's air superiority strategy. There's I-Star spy planes, indigenous surveillance aircraft acquisition to enhance intelligence gathering capabilities. There's the QR-SAM, which we discussed, quick reaction surface-to-air missile systems to counter aerial threats. There's AI-powered weapons, testing of AI-powered light machine guns and other next-generation fighter planes, next-generation systems. There's more. There's hypersonic missiles which will be tested, and so on and so forth. There's directed energy weapons that will be tested, and so on and so forth. So this recent conflict that happened a month ago, which highlighted both vulnerabilities and the success of certain indigenous systems, has acted as a major catalyst. It has lit a fire under our backside. Okay, so it has acted as a major catalyst for the Atmanirbhar Bharat, self-reliant India defense initiative. And then we have this sad story that happened yesterday, the catastrophic Air India Boeing 787 crash, 241 fatalities on board the flight, one survivor. Well, and there's a 5% stock drop, immediate impact on Boeing's market value, the first ever crash of a 787 Dreamliner. This has triggered a major international investigation and renewed scrutiny of Boeing's manufacturing and safety standards. It's a major mystery as to how two engines can fail simultaneously on such a sophisticated airliner. This national tragedy, which is so sad, has immediate and far-reaching implications for India's rapidly growing aviation sector. It will force, and I'm glad it will force, a comprehensive safety review of India's commercial fleet and regulatory oversight. The high-level international response underscores India's geopolitical weight, with world leaders using the tragedy as an opportunity for diplomatic outreach. What does it mean? We're going to discuss that. Now, then obviously there's the US-China. The US-China tech war. What are the risks? What are the opportunities? This is something that's ongoing. It's going to be ongoing for the rest of the year. So we're going to have to keep an eye on this the coming week at least. The US-China tech war is escalating. The US has imposed specific AI chip restrictions on Huawei, and China has retaliated with export controls on rare earth minerals. This dynamic is disrupting global supply chains. It's forcing a strategic recalculation for India. So, targeted controls on advanced semiconductor chips to China, that's the US AI chip restrictions. China has responded with rare earth controls, export restrictions directly impacting India's automotive sector. So, there's the potential for India to position itself as an alternate tech hub. This the manufacturing opportunities, and India has launched a sovereign AI cloud Yotta, and India plans for indigenous GPUs. That's indigenous technology. So that's an ongoing storyline. And then there's India's complex relationship with the United Kingdom. India and the UK have finalized a free trade agreement and are strengthening counterterrorism cooperation. However, this progress is undercut by the UK's unexpected decision, which came into the news today, I think, to add India to its no travel warning list alongside countries like Syria and Russia. So let's take a look at these two things. FTA finalization. The India-UK FTA free trade agreement was finalized after negotiations relaunched in February. This represents a major economic win for both sides, for both countries. It's driven by the UK's need for a new for new Indo-Pacific partnerships, and also it's driven by India's desire for market access. Concurrently, UK's Foreign Secretary David Lammy visited New Delhi to express support for India's counterterrorism stance post Operation Sindoor, and this has strengthened bilateral security cooperation. Now, this positive engagement is starkly contrasted by this new travel advisory that essentially came out today, which represents a significant diplomatic slap, suggesting that there are deep-seated security concerns of a major disconnect within the UK government. So they have put India on this list, no travel list. Not the whole of the country, but parts of the country. Manipur, Kashmir, any border regions, and so on and so forth. And they've also expressed concerns about the Indian aviation industry, I believe. So India's response to this will test India's ability to compartmentalize economic and diplomatic relations. I predict that India will issue a formal diplomatic protest and implement reciprocal travel advisories for UK citizens while expediting efforts to address the specific security concerns cited. India's rising economic clout. So India has, as we know, it was all over the news. India has surpassed Germany to become the world's fourth largest economy, and India is actively leveraging its growing economic and demographic weight to pursue a multi-aligned foreign policy, strengthening ties with various global partners. So India has secured an invitation to the G7 summit from Canada, which was a little unexpected, but okay. So this highlights India's growing global influence and strategic importance in international forums, and especially in light of the kind of relations we have had with Canada since the 2023 G7 summit, or G20 summit, right? Then India has finalized a trade pact with the EFTA bloc and is nearing an interim trade deal with the US, which expands India's economic partnerships across multiple regions. India is conducting a lithium diplomacy tour in South America to challenge China's dominance in critical minerals, securing resources essential for India's technological and industrial development. So India is successfully translating its economic growth into geopolitical influence by simultaneously engaging with the US, with Europe, and resource-rich regions like South America. India is executing a sophisticated hedging strategy that aims to maximize economic benefits, secure critical supply chains, and maintain strategic autonomy. Then we have the Pentagon's AUKUS review, which is creating uncertainty. And this is actually a soft signal. We are into the territory of soft signals now. So the Pentagon, the US Pentagon, has launched a review of the AUKUS AUKUS Security Pact, which is a cornerstone of US strategy to contain China. And this is creating significant uncertainty for Australia and for India and for the broader Indo Pacific security architecture, the US led security architecture. So the Australian submarine deal is at risk. This review is ongoing, and reports are suggesting it could lead to the scrapping of the nuclear submarine deal for Australia. So this has prompted Australia to accelerate alternative defense acquisitions, including exploring a deal for Japanese-designed frigates. This is a strategic concern for India. India is not a direct participant in AUKUS, but the potential unraveling of AUKUS is a major strategic concern for us. AUKUS was seen as a key component of the lattice work of alliances that is designed to balance China. And the failure of AUKUS would signal wavering US commitment to the region. And who knows, anything can happen under the divine leadership of President Trump. So any weakening of AUKUS would increase the security burden on other Quad members like India, like Japan, and this could force a major strategic rethink in New Delhi. Maybe it will be a good wake-up call once again, maybe. So this review of AUKUS by the Pentagon is part of a broader reassessment of US foreign policy commitments under the Trump administration. Trump has this very transactional worldview, a very short-term worldview, and this could throw AUKUS under the bus. So this review places greater importance on other regional security arrangements, such as the Quad and bilateral ties between India, Japan, and Australia. Okay, so that was not a soft signal. Now we are getting into the realm of soft signals. So that was a continuing storyline, which we're going to have to keep an eye on over the coming week. So soft signals are signals that are beyond the headlines, beyond the major storylines. These signals may indicate emerging trends or shifts in strategic thinking that could have outsized impacts in the future, like the butterfly effect, that sort of thing. So these signals are not headline news today, but these developments provide valuable early indicators of changing dynamics in areas ranging from defense, industrial policy to energy security and diplomatic positioning. So let's take a look at some of these soft signals. Prime Minister Modi has declared India's ambition to become a top defense exporter. That's just a statement, but it's a very interesting soft signal. So Prime Minister Modi's declaration signals a major shift in India's defense industrial strategy from import dependence to export orientation. This ambition represents a strategic effort to convert India's significant defense spending into a geopolitical and economic asset. So achieving this goal would enhance India's strategic autonomy, create new revenue streams for India, and position India as a security provider in the Indo-Pacific and beyond, directly competing with established players like China. And the success of this initiative would strengthen India's Make in India initiative and give India greater influence in regional and beyond security dynamics by becoming a key supplier of arms to friendly nations. This ambition is amplified by reports of Chinese-made military hardware underperforming in the recent India-Pakistan conflict, which potentially opens markets for Indian alternatives which are now battle-tested. So we need to watch for policy incentives and export targets for domestic defense manufacturers, which would indicate the seriousness of this initiative and its potential timeline for implementation. What's the next soft signal? Semiconductor Self-Reliance Partnership. So a state-owned defense firm, BEL, and a private tech leader, Tata, are partnering to develop indigenous semiconductor solutions. This public-private partnership is a crucial step in India's push for technological sovereignty, Atmanirbhar Bharat. So this partnership aims to address vulnerabilities exposed by the global semiconductor shortage and the US-China tech war. And the objective is to reduce India's dependence on foreign technology. Next, we want to create a domestic semiconductor ecosystem, and this is essential for both economic growth and national security, and it will support everything from consumer electronics to advanced weapons systems. It has all kinds of uses, including military and civilian uses. So we should watch for government funding announcements for domestic fabrication facilities, which would indicate the scale and timeline of India's semiconductor ambitions. So this initiative builds on India's previous attempts to develop indigenous semiconductor capabilities through the special incentive package scheme, but with greater urgency and strategic focus given the current extremely volatile geopolitical environment. Chinese netizens have criticized charity jet sales to Pakistan. So, Chinese social media users are criticizing the Chinese government's subsidized sale of J-35 jets to Pakistan. This domestic pushback signals potential internal constraints on China's military support for its allies. This is internal dissent from within China, which is pretty rare, and this is most likely controlled, but it provides a valuable signal for Indian strategists. It suggests that Beijing's all-weather support for Pakistan may have domestic economic and political costs. If China's own economic challenges intensify, public pressure from within China could potentially limit the scope or generosity of future military aid to Pakistan, which could subtly alter the long-term strategic balance in the region, in our region, in India's favor. Then, similar domestic criticism emerged in China regarding economic aid to Pakistan during previous Chinese economic slowdowns. This suggests a pattern of public sensitivity to foreign aid during periods of domestic economic stress. So, an economic downturn in China leading to greater public scrutiny of foreign military aid could be a significant trigger down the line in the future for policy adjustments that would impact the China-Pakistan military relationship. Coal India has reopened mines as green energy struggles. So, India's state-owned Coal India is reopening dozens of mines as renewable sources cannot meet India's rising energy demand. India's energy demand is rising, no question. So, this signals a pragmatic recalibration of India's energy policy, prioritizing energy security and economic growth over climate commitments. Okay? Excuse me. So for India, a stable power supply is non-negotiable. No questions about it. No negotiations. This is non-negotiable for India's industrial ambitions and for India's growing population. This move of reopening some mines, it highlights the immense challenge India faces in its green transition. India's coal dependence continues. Coal will remain a critical part of India's energy mix for the foreseeable future, complicating its position in international climate negotiations. So, what triggers should we watch for? A significant increase in global energy prices or a disruption to India's imported energy resources. See, supplies could accelerate this trend towards domestic coal production. So this development follows India's increased coal production during the 21-22 global energy crisis and coal shortages. And this demonstrates a consistent pattern for India of prioritizing energy security when renewable and alternatives cannot meet demand. And this is the right policy. It's the right way to do things. We cannot go down the road of Germany of shutting down all of your nuclear power plants and creating a self-imposed energy crisis. So yeah, makes sense. Now, China has adapting a quiet push influence strategy. China is developing alternative influence strategies in India that do not rely on its traditional reliance on a large scale Chinese speaking diaspora. This signals an evolution in China's soft power and influence operations targeted at India. So there's a lack of a Chinese diaspora in India, right? The Chinese have diasporas in Singapore, in Australia, in Thailand, and so on and so forth. That's a nice shortcut for influence, but there is a lack of that in India. So the Chinese are acknowledging the lack of a diaspora shortcut for influence operations in India. So the Chinese are likely to use subtle economic investments to build influence and shape narratives. Educational and cultural exchange programs could become vectors for soft power projection and injection into India. So the Chinese could fund Indian media outlets. They could indirectly fund television channels. They could indirectly fund YouTube influencers and Instagram influencers and whatnot. Very easy to do that if you have deep pockets. So India needs more sophisticated strategies to monitor and mitigate these non-traditional vectors. So, what should we watch for? We should watch for increased Chinese investment in Indian media organizations. And this will never happen directly. We will watch for indirect investment, not just media organizations, but educational institutions and cultural exchange programs. And this would indicate the implementation of this strategy. And this approach mirrors China's use of Confucius institutes in the past and economic leverage in the past to build influence in Southeast Asian nations. Now, India Pakistan, India's choke strategy for Pakistan. So, a detailed naval analysis published by the Center for International Maritime Security, CIMSEC, suggests that India is developing cyber and electronic warfare capabilities to neutralize Pakistan's maritime surveillance. This indicates a shift towards high tech asymmetric warfare. So that this doctrinal evolution is a direct response to the need to manage a two-front threat environment. By developing capabilities to choke Pakistan's maritime access and to blind Pakistan's radar systems, India aims to achieve a decisive advantage quickly in a potential conflict. Quickly, you need that immediately on demand. So this approach would free up resources to focus on the more significant China challenge, and this represents a strategic prioritization of the threats that India faces. This is a technology-driven approach. This signals a move away from purely kinetic options towards a more integrated technology-driven approach to regional deterrence. And this builds on historical precedents like India's naval blockade of Pakistan, Karachi, etc., during the 71 war. So we need to watch for escalation of tensions along the line of control or a significant terrorist incident, which could trigger the implementation of these capabilities in a real world scenario. What's the next soft signal that we have? Mr. Putin and Mr. Zelensky have both offered condolences to India, and they are both signaling outreach to India. So both the Russian and Ukrainian presidents have expressed condolences over the Air India crash, which is a rare moment of parallel diplomatic messaging for both these leaders. This subtle signal reaffirms India's continued strategic importance to both sides in the Russia-Ukraine war. So despite American pressure, India has successfully maintained its multi-aligned posture, and this synchronized outreach demonstrates that both Moscow and Kiev see value in courting New Delhi. And this diplomatic capital is a key asset for India, which allows India to maintain critical relationships like the defense relationship with Russia, economic ties with the West, etc., at the same time, that are central to India's strategic autonomy. Future implications, we need to watch for India taking a more definitive position on the Russia-Ukraine conflict or significant arms deals with either country, which could alter this delicate balance. That could be something that happens months down the line if it ever happens. So this pattern of diplomatic outreach by both Russia and Ukraine following Indian national tragedies highlights India's unique position as a power that maintains constructive relations with opposing blocs in the current international system. Now let's summarize what's happened thus far. This week was dominated by the fallout of the May military conflict between India and Pakistan. From our perspective, that's what it is. And this has reset regional strategic dynamics. India has adopted a more aggressive counter-terrorism posture and is using non-military levers like the Indus Waters Treaty, while the conflict has cemented the China-Pakistan military axis as an immediate and advanced threat for India. This is forcing India, and I would like to thank China for this. This is forcing India to accelerate its own military modernization and indigenization drive with significant new investments in domestic defense production and strategic partnerships with Western and possibly other allies. So looking forward, looking ahead, what are the strategic challenges that India faces? So in parallel, India is navigating a complex relationship with a US that appears to be revealing its true intentions by pursuing a pro-Pakistan policy, which seems to be driven, at least in part, by the Trump financial empire's deep investments in Pakistan. This is pushing India to deepen its multi-aligned foreign policy by strengthening economic and security ties with the UK, with the EU, and other global players to maintain its strategic autonomy. The terrible, catastrophic Air India crash in Ahmedabad has introduced a major domestic challenge with international repercussions for Boeing and the global aviation industry. And this is testing India's crisis management capabilities, and it's highlighting India's global importance. And that is it for this week's episode of the Indian Interest Podcast. I hope this was useful, this was valuable to you. In case it was, please give me a big thumbs up. If you're Pakistani, you can leave a thumbs down. And please like, share, subscribe, etc. And if you have questions for me, I will take them shortly in the Ask Abhijit live stream that will begin in a few minutes from now. So thank you so much for watching. Please let me know what you thought about this presentation in the comments below. And I will see you very soon, wherever we meet again. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.